It's got to be probably one of the best Christmas movies there is, to be honest. Have you guys started your binge, your Christmas movie binge? How many of you are like suckers for those Hallmark movies? Those things are so terrible. And I think they know it. That's the best part of it. Is like, guys, God, just keep making the same crappy movies. People will watch them, and we'll make tons of money, right? They don't have to be good actors. They just got to look good. Just put them up there, right? How many of you, I've seen these advertised Boxing Day deals coming up to Christmas. How many of you have done these DNA tests like 23andMe? You guys do these? Like, it's so funny because it's just like, and just think about it a little bit. We want you to spit in this little plastic cup. We want you to mail it to us. And what we're going to do is we're going to take your family history. We're going to get all your DNA information. We're going to get your financial information. We're going to get your family history, your whole tree. And in return, we're just going to tell you how white you are, right? Like that's basically what these things are. We're just obsessed with these things. But there's something about finding out your history. There's something about finding out your story. It's not that like your history dictates who you are, but there's these genetic tests, sometimes finding out your ancestry is one of those ways of like it shades in or like colors who you are, your personality, and it kind of like, that's the way I am. There's like TLC, of course, has a show on like finding out who you were and all this. You see these bumps up. I'm always kind of scared that somewhere in my past is going to be like this old-timey serial killer or like someone who defected from the army because they were a coward. Like I'm worried about doing it because I'm like, I don't want to find that out. And I feel like it's inevitable I'll live that out if I find out. It's just, I'm okay with knowing where my parents came from, and that's kind of it. But these like 23andMe or these other DNA kits, they're kind of like just the new school genealogies. They've been around for centuries. This idea of knowing where you came from and who you are. It's a way of tracing your story. And it's boring until you begin seeing the people in the midst of it and figuring it all out. And I think there's a reason why they keep selling these kits, because people just want to know, where do I come from? What is my story? So we started this new series, or we're starting it tonight, of kings, prophets, and prostitutes. It's probably the most overlooked part of the Christmas story. And it's this, in fact, it's one of those parts of the Christmas story where you're mostly told as a pastor, don't preach it, because it's super boring. It's found right at the beginning of Matthew, and it says this, an account of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah. And if you were to read the first chapter of Matthew, it's all these names you can't pronounce of stories that you have like zero connection to. Like literally, try reading it fast. It's a bit of a tongue twister. It's a great holiday game for the family. And so when things get a little tense, talking about religion or politics, just pull out Matthew 1 and be like, read it as fast as you can, right? And they tell you, don't read it, don't preach on it, because it's really hard to dig in there. But to be honest, this is the story of what brought about Jesus. It's a story. It's a story of Jesus. It's what brought peace. It's what brought joy. It's what brought Emmanuel, God with us. It's found in Matthew 1. And so it's overlooked, but to be honest, I actually think it has some of the most important pieces of information for us to even understand the story of Jesus, why he came, and how it relates to you. In a story that's hard for you to connect with, what if I told you there's a lot of you inside of it? And that's why I wanted to pay attention to it. That's why I want us this month to kind of break it down a little bit. I'm not going to preach like name by name, right? But this story, what you find is that it's not perfect. You read the names in there's no perfect person. In fact, there's a lot of broken stories in there. There's a lot of issues in that whole genealogy. I mean, to look back on it, if that was your genealogy, be like, I don't know if I'm like super proud of that. But that's kind of what the story is, because the story really is a story of us. It's filled with kings, people in power, people who had the ability to affect change. There's prophets, those people who literally were forced almost to say something. They had something in their belly. God had told them a story. They needed to say something, but they were amongst the people who didn't want to listen. And then you have these sort of prostitutes, these people who probably would not have been part of any genealogy back then. They were the people who wouldn't have felt like they were enough, but yet we get the story of peace, of God coming to us through these imperfect people in very different situations, in very different timelines, in different socioeconomic economic realities. Peace, God with us, coming through us, humans. It's not an angelic genealogy. It's not like Jesus just showed up and he's like, what's up, right? And it's like, where did you come from? Where'd the baby come from, right? Like, it came from humans. It came from imperfection. This genealogy is our story. Somewhere in this genealogy, you are called to be responsible. Somewhere in this genealogy, just like you and I, you find this voice that can't be shut up amidst the people who are not listening. In this story, we find some of us in these places who feel like we're not enough to know that Jesus still comes through that. This genealogy is our story. It's how we first connect with it. You can't skip over it because the Jesus story becomes disengaging for you. It's in this genealogy that you find that you are fully engaged in the story, that Jesus has come and decided to come, peace on earth, joy to the world, presence. God himself comes through you and me. And tonight, you and I are kings, leaders, queens. Me? You? Yeah. But doesn't a leader have people who are following them? No one's following me. A leader is a lot of people following them. I don't. A leader is in charge. I'm not in charge. A leader is supposed to know a lot of things. I don't know a lot, right? There's one of you actually left your keys in the girls' washroom, and you're thinking, literally, one of you did. So if you're missing keys, they're at the front desk. But, some of you are like, I can't even hold on to my own keys in the washroom. How am I a leader? Here's what a leader is. Wherever you have influence, you are a leader. Wherever somebody looks to you for information, wherever you have a voice that can change or affect something, you are a leader. Somewhere in your life, every single one of you in this room, somewhere in your life, you have influence. There's maybe not in every sphere, but wherever you do have influence, you have a responsibility and you have an opportunity. And this last series, we talked about some of the emotions that we wrestle with. We kind of came down to meet you where you're at, to help you process some of those things. This series is about calling you to something not yet in you. To call something out of you knowing that God has something for you and he wants to work in you and through you. Whether you're a manager, a teacher, in your friends group, maybe it's as an employee, maybe in your family, maybe you got people in your life who don't know Jesus. Listen, every single one of you, somewhere in your life, you have a responsibility and an opportunity to lead. Somewhere. It's in those places, wherever you have influence, you are a leader. Say that with me tonight. I am a leader. Oh, that was terrible. You don't believe me yet. Say it with me. I am a leader. In those places where you have influence, whether it's those relationships, whether it's just in the places that you work, you have a responsibility and an opportunity to lead people towards who Jesus is, what he brings, to usher in peace, to usher in joy, to usher in the very presence of God and his justice and his goodness in those places, in those relationships. You have the ability, the responsibility, and the opportunity to do that. And here's the thing, the power of that opportunity is laid bare throughout the Old Testament, of when people abuse it, when people misuse it, and when people actually use it for God's good. You have these stories in the Old Testament of these judges who literally, when they weren't there, no one leading the people of God, you get things like this. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. There was no leadership. It was a message and it was a verse signifying chaos, where no one is stepping up and bringing voice to what God has or what he wants for them. There is chaos. When there is bad leadership, when someone's misusing it and abusing it, the whole nation of God suffered. It said that they went and did their own thing, or they served other gods, and they were punished and they were brought into captivity. When they were led terribly, when people didn't take the responsibility and the opportunity to lead people towards God's goodness for them, the whole nation suffered. But then you get these stories like this woman named Deborah, this judge. She stepped up. And you read things like Deborah, the wife of Lepidoth, was a prophet who was judging Israel. Okay, at this time, any woman in this very patriarchal society, in this culture, this is a little bit, this typically wouldn't happen. But this woman, Deborah, she would sit under the palm of Deborah. Wouldn't it be cool having a tree named after you? Anyways, between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites would go to her for judgment. They would look for her wisdom, look for her understanding, look to go, hey, what do I do here? And it says that there was peace in the land for 40 years that she ruled. See, when people understand the responsibility, but also see it as an opportunity to lead towards others' good, people move into good. People begin to see peace, they begin to see joy, they begin to see what happens when God leads them. That is my opportunity and responsibility. Like I said, you may not have influence or opportunity in every sphere of your life, but where you do have it, and it's our responsibility to know where we have it, to be aware of it, you have the responsibility to be the kind of person who allows the Spirit of God to use you towards others' good, to literally give them a glimpse of heaven. To be able to usher in, like this story, this genealogy does, usher in this reality of going, this is peace. This is the hope you're looking for. This is the goodness of God. This is justice. This is righteousness. This is what God has intended you for. You and I have the ability, the responsibility, and the opportunity to do that. I think of Mary, who's a huge part of the story. I mean, if it wasn't for Mary, well, Jesus wouldn't be born. But Mary, this woman, teenager, she's not your typical leader. She's not someone that she was in this forgotten town, this forgotten woman. And yet it's incredible because you hear this young woman and you hear things like this. Mary responded when she heard that she's going to give birth to literally the Son of God, right? It's like, how is this going to happen? And she says, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm a little nervous here. I'm super scared. I'm engaged with a guy who's going to think I slept with another man now. But listen to her response. I am the Lord's servant. May everything you have said about me come true. And you hear through her story how her song and how her life even helped her fiance come to grips with it, how she literally led over Jesus' life, leading people to faith in Jesus because of her willingness and obedience to understand this is what I've been called to do, and I will be responsible, and I'll take the opportunity to honor God with it and honor others. This woman ushered in the very Son of God, and I am convinced that every single one of you in this room have the ability in someone else's life to usher in the very presence and goodness of God. And here's the thing, it's not within these walls. It's not in this crazy worship experience. It's not when you have a stage, it is totally and entirely done by the way that you and I choose to live. It's determined by the degree in which we become aware that we are responsible. Become aware of the lives that are around us and how our life could actually affect change in someone else's life. See, the greatest influence you will ever have will be your character. It will be who you are. It's not about your skill. It's about who you are, no matter where you are. Saul, he was a king. He was known as a chosen one. And so was David, who followed him as king. Things ended poorly for both of them. Simply being a chosen one in the Bible doesn't automatically mean someone is doing the right thing. There's a morality component to the fulfillment of that role. Andy Stanley, he's a pastor in the States, and he says it this way. You don't need character to be a leader. But a leader worth following, character is absolutely necessary. And I think for our generation, character is essential to affecting any change. These leaders and these stories, they were fallible, they were mistake-ridden people. What set them apart, though, is what can set you apart in your workplaces, in your school, in your home, wherever you find yourself. wherever you're looked at for help, wherever you're looked at for influence, wherever you're looked at for some sort of opinion, wherever you can affect change, wherever you can have some sort of say in someone else's life, the difference is this, is having an awareness, having wisdom, and having faith. And to every single one of you, it's totally available. Solomon, he's one of the actually kings named in the genealogy. And it's interesting, he's the son of David, who is known as one of, or if not, the greatest king that Israel ever had. And Solomon is his son. And there's this exchange in this book of the Bible called 1 Kings, where David has died, his dad has died, now Solomon must take over, and he understands that he's got to take over this big role. And there's this exchange between him and God is literally asking him, what do you want, Solomon? And just think about it. Let's say God was like, listen, I'm going to get you to lead a certain amount of people. What questions would you have? What would you require? I'd be like, someone else. It's like, I need someone else to do it. I'll watch them. I'll clap, right? And that's good, but just like, give them the responsibility. Someone's like, I need money, I need resources, I need tools. And it's really interesting. In Solomon's prayer, we get this reality that all of us can get. We get this sense that all God desires is us to be willing. And the first thing you notice in his prayer is a deep awareness of his responsibility and his opportunity. It says this in 1 Kings 3, 5-8. That night the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream. And God said, what do you want? Ask, and I will give it to you. I love Solomon's awareness here. He says this, now, O Lord my God, you have made me king instead of my father David. But I am like a little child who doesn't know his way around. I left my keys in the bathroom. And here I am, in the midst of your own chosen people, a nation so great and numerous that cannot be counted. God, do you know what you just put me into? I've got to lead all these boneheads somewhere, and I'm the biggest bonehead of them all. And I know the minute that I tell you that you are a leader, you're thinking, no, I'm the biggest bonehead in this room. I don't know what to do, but what if I told you that's the point? There's this guy named C.S. Lewis. He's super smart. You probably read some of his books. Maybe you watched, The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, or you read Mere Christianity, whatever. He wrote all that stuff, and he has this incredible quote on human beings. And he says this, there are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilizations, these are mortal. And their life is to ours as the life of a gnat. But it is immortals in whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit, immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. God has chosen you to effect change in these everlasting immortals. It is beyond you. It's beyond me, but that's the point. Is that God has chosen imperfect people to lead imperfect people to a God who sees and God who is perfect. A people who love not so well to a God who loves extremely well. To people who with very little grace and a lot of anger, to a God who's slow to anger with an immeasurable amount of grace. To people who have no peace, to a God who says, I am the God of peace, who passes understanding. To people who are soiled with emotion, to a God who is filled with joy. We, for some reason, are tasked, like in the genealogy, we begin to see that we are called and tasked to understand the weighty responsibility of leading not mere mortals, but these immortal, these splendid beings made in the image of God towards God's goodness. That's what God is calling you to. And I think being where Solomon was going, why are you asking me to do this? You know who I am. You are God, right? Like, what if I told you God's not surprised? God knows before you. But that's the point. See, accountability to something greater than you is what's going to push the things out of you that need to come out and put into you the things that need to go in. A lot of us are waiting for an opportunity. A lot of us are waiting till we're right, till we're the right kind of person, till someone says, oh, now you can do it. I'm telling you right now, if you always wait to lead, you'll never lead. And sometimes putting yourself into a position of understanding that the people around my life that I can affect change, I'm kind of responsible for, it's this weight that brings health. It's this weight that helps you figure out your own stuff. It's that weight that helps you begin to recognize that, wow, if God wants to affect change in their life, this probably means he wants to affect change in my life too. See, the best leaders know it's not actually about them. It's about the people they serve. It's about the people around them. It's laying their life down. Even Jesus said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. What kind of person do you want your life to create? Is that a weird question to ask yourself? If you had a chance to design someone's life, to affect change in someone's life, to go like, I want them to know God. Maybe I want to know his joy. Maybe I want to make them responsible for themselves. Maybe I want to make them this, that. Think about all these great things that you want to shape. Then ask yourself, am I that person? Do I do that in my own life? See, the responsibility and accountability to building someone, to serving someone, there's this reflection back to going, where do I need to work? Where do I need to let God work through me? And it's in those places that, I don't know if you remember this from October, but it's something that I'll say over and over again. Maybe you've heard me say it a few times is this, is when you stop is finally when you let the Holy Spirit take over. And maybe God's waiting for you to come to a point where you just realize you don't have it in you, for him to be in to say, I know, I was just waiting for you to realize that, so I can form it into you. Who do you want to create? Think of the lives around you. Think of the people you've got influence over. To what direction you want to influence their life. That weight, I know it seems heavy, but let me remind you, God has chosen us to affect change in people's world. And can I encourage you? There's this guy named Paul in the Bible. He writes the majority of the New Testament. And he writes to this young guy named Timothy. And he's leading a church. He's probably in his 20s somewhere, doesn't really know what he's doing. And what Paul writes to Timothy, I want to share with you, and it's this. Don't let anyone think less of you because you are young. Be an example to all believers, I'd say, and to all people. In what you say, in the way you live, in your love, your faith, and your purity. I am calling you, not because I think you're not, but because I think that you're already there. I think it's because it's in you. You just got to get it out. Don't let anyone think of you less because you're young. Instead, be an example in the way you live. It's an awareness. The second thing you find in Solomon's prayer is actually wisdom. It's amazing. He makes this one request. God, give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. Isn't that crazy? Can you imagine that? God saying, hey, listen, I need you to lead my people. And what you hear back from the guy you just told to lead your people is this: help me know right and wrong, right? Like, did he put like a 10-year-old in charge? Like, he's a full-grown man. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours? And there was the weight, that responsibility, there was an ask from it. Give me wisdom. See, when we think of leadership, when we think of being a leader anywhere, we think that leadership requires position, requires power, requires resources, requires, tons of great opportunities. That's actually not what you get in this prayer. What you require is wisdom. I don't want to be asking, but have you heard some of the decisions I've made? Christmas is going to be lit, but my finances are literally on fire. I'm not doing so well. See, whether you see yourself as wise or maybe lacking in wisdom, what if I told you that every single person in this room can grow in wisdom? You may not have the opportunity. You may not have the power or the position, but all you need is wisdom, and that's available to every single one of you. How do you grow in wisdom? How do you do it? Well, it's funny. So first thing is you pray for it. So this guy named James, who writes his self-book, James, he says this: if you need wisdom, ask not God, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. If you need wisdom, ask for it. In this book called Proverbs, which Solomon writes, it's known as the wisdom book of the Bible, and it says this: fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Fear of the Lord literally just means a reverence for God. It's not like, it's the idea of a reverence. It's a respect. It's an understanding that God is God and you are not. And so if you know that God equals human flourishing, if you know that Jesus equals peace and joy and presence and justice, then you need to get to know who he is. You'd spill over his word, you'd spill over in prayer, you'd find out everything you could, you'd be around people who know about them, you learn about it, you get into relationship with him, you pray for wisdom, you ask. And then the second thing you do is you just ask yourself some really good questions. There's this Bible called Ephesians. It's one verse where I think is literally should be everyone's life verse, and it's this: so be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Be careful how you live. Some really good questions to ask yourself. If you want to grow in wisdom, here's some really great questions. First is this: will my future self thank me or regret it? Think of a decision you're making. Think about, some people are like, how do I make decisions? This is a really good question to help you. Will my future self thank me or will I regret it? Maybe you're in a position in your life right now. Maybe you're going, yeah, what I'm doing right now, my future self is going to thank me. See, wisdom is the ability to understand that every single one of your decisions are fully connected with your future. It will affect it. That's what wisdom is. So am I going to regret this or am I going to win because of this in my future? I may not love it right now, but my future person is going to love this. Second question is this: how will this affect those around me? A wise person also understands that your life is deeply connected with other people's lives. And if you're hurting people around you who love you, you're probably making an unwise decision. If it's leading to your health and other people's health and their goodness, if I lead a life that can lead people to change, and if I'm healthy, that means I can help people become healthy, that is a good decision. That's wise. Third question is this: is this the best next right thing for me to do? There's a lot of decisions you got to parse through. And I tell every single person this: it's not actually knowing your future. It's with everything you know right now, you're only responsible for one thing. Am I making the next best decision based on what I know right now? That's your responsibility, that's it. And if 5 years down the road, you look back and go like, that was super dumb, I still think you made the right decision. Listen, there's many times I look back and I'm like, man, that was a really dumb decision. But at the time, that's actually the best that I knew at that point. These are 3 questions that help you grow in wisdom, because here's reality. In Proverbs 2, verses 1 to 8, it says this, or 3 to 8, it says, cry out for insight, ask for understanding, search for them as you would for silver, seek them like hidden treasures. Then you will understand what it means to fear the Lord, and you will gain knowledge of God, for the Lord grants wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He grants a treasure of common sense to the honest. He is a shield to those who walk with integrity. He guards the paths of the just and protects those who are faithful to him. Basically, go after it. Go after wisdom, because here's the thing. Wisdom is the right application of knowledge. That's all wisdom is. This is why there's a huge portion of my life is studying what's going on in culture, what's going on in your lives, how can I better understand it? Because I'm passionate about your life. I want every single one of you to succeed. I want you to know God's best for your life, and I want you to have the best in your relationships. I want you to have the best in your work life. I want you to have that. I want you to know that I'm in your corner when things are not going really well. I want to create community that happens, and I don't know how to do that myself. So I search for knowledge as if it's like pure rubies. And the weights of responsibility and opportunity that you have to affect change should kind of turn itself into this passion to get as much knowledge as you can so that you can apply it, which is wisdom. So what do you know right now to be right, to be good, to be just, to be peaceful? What do you know to be Christ-like? Wisdom is actually just doing it. It's applying it and repeat. And I get it. Some people are like, well, that sounds like pretty easy. Yeah, until it doesn't feel good. Until it kind of breaks relationships. Until it makes things a little awkward. Wisdom is knowing what is right and the right thing to do and the best thing to do and doing it. Foolishness is deciding against it. That's tough. It's an awareness. It's wisdom in which all of us can get our hands on. In fact, our generous God will hand it out. I didn't have this in here, but I came across this story of Solomon when I was like 12. And I have prayed that prayer, I think, almost weekly. God, I have zero idea what I'm doing. Would you give me wisdom? And he's been faithful. And the third and last thing that you hear in Solomon's prayer is faith. The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for wisdom. So God replied, because you've asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice, I've not asked for a long life, I've not asked for wealth, I've not asked for the death of your enemies, which would be so much easier. God, just kill my student loans. Or maybe the guy at the bank who's in control of it, Because you've not asked for that, I will give you what you asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one else had ever will have. Listen, when God asks you to do something, he's faithful to make sure it gets done through you. That's faith. It's not faith in your abilities. It's faith in the God who says, I'm going to get you to do it. And you're like, all right, it's on you, God. It's having faith that what God asks you to do, what he's calling you to do, he's faithful to complete it. I'm certain that God who began the good work within you will continue his work until it's finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns. He's not back yet, so he's still doing things in you. He's not done with you. It's not your job to control everything. That's not what leadership is. It's not to make sure that everyone does all the right things. Your job is to see and be aware of the opportunity and the responsibility that you have and to live faithfully, trusting that God will work in you and through you, with and sometimes even despite you. Our job is just to execute. Not like people, but like execute the task, get to it, work at it. It's to be aware of what God has asked us to do, to come to grips with that. It's to ask God for wisdom and to try to get to know what the right, best next is and to do it, to just do it and trust with faith that God will come through and finish his work through you. Here's the thing. Mary actually didn't give birth in the sense of the Son of God. She just gave birth in obedience. And it just happened to be that God fulfilled his calling through that child. God is working something in you because he wants to work something out of you too. You are a leader. Lead in the way you live. And remember that not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but be that person who says, I'm going to set an example. Where are you responsible? In your life, where do you have opportunity? God didn't call you to be a spectator. He called you to engage his story. And like we read in Matthew 1, from these imperfect kings, prophets, and prostitutes comes the greatest peace, joy, and justice the world has ever known. And if only we would see that that story is our story. If you're here tonight and you've heard these stories of baptism, you're hearing about God and who he is, and you just don't have a connection with Jesus, I'm a firm believer that here at the Project, you can belong before you have to believe everything that we ascribe to. You're one of us. You're our people. You're our family. And you just have questions about who Jesus is and where to start. We just have this ebook that we send you. You just text next to 555-888, and we just send you this online resource, this digital resource to read through, and no one's going to call you, show up at your door. It's just for you to just read and take in. It's just a great place to start. And I'd say to you as well, you may not ascribe to this, but I firmly believe that you, as much as I am, was made in the image of God and created for good works. You, all of you, are a leader, so lead. Let's pray. God, I thank you that you love us as we are. God, everything that we can do to affect change in our world, to experience you doing miracles in and through our life, everything's accessible. God, will we just have faith to know that you'll execute, that you will work in us and through us? Jesus, we pray. I pray for all of us in awareness of the people and the lives around us, the places we have influence. I pray that you'd grant us wisdom beyond our years and experience. And God, also I pray that you grant us the experience of seeing lives changed because you have faithfully lived in and through us as we've just trusted you. Pray for those who maybe tonight are just thinking about starting a relationship with you or just finding out who you are. God, I pray that they would know that when you say come follow, you invite us into this kind of relationship of just watching you and hearing you. And God, I pray that it would be so vivid, you speaking to them, you doing things in their life. Pray that you be with us this week and this entire month as we look forward to Christmas. Amen. Guys, thanks for hanging out tonight. And we'll see you next week as we continue our series. And we got hot chocolate and write some cards for some people very much forgotten. Have a good night. Have a good week.